The internet is no longer a benign place about community.
The web has grown up and become much more commercial and really competitive.
Interrogation, it describes this pattern of platform decay. First, platforms find a way to lock users in, and once it's hard for them to leave, they make things worse for them in order to make things better for business customers. Once they're locked in, the platform withdraws all of the value from those sellers as well, and eventually it's just a pile of.
If we're in a world where only commercial software exists, that means your reality is dictated by commercial interests.
Open source is a way to build software that increases freedom and autonomy in the world. And I feel like we have to fight for that freedom.
There's this expression in the open source world, free as in freedom, not free as in beer. Because a lot of people think that free means, like, I don't have to pay for it. The free stands for the freedom of using, reading, modifying, sharing the code.
One of the defining things around open source is that anyone can scrutinize the work.
The reason why every single company in the world is built on open source is because it is the safest technology of all.
With open source, you can see the decisions being made, you can see the lines of code, you can decide what you want to do with your data.
It's like a technological democracy.
Anyone who wants to can take our content and do anything they like with it. You can copy it, redistribute it.
It really allows different people to work together.
There's an aspect of what do we give back to the world?
We have this Promethean task to take the fire from the gods and bring it to the people. My dad, he was always tinkering. We didn't have a lot of money. We'd often buy things that were broken or breaking down, cars or stereos. We'd go to garage sales, buy something that was cheap but broken. He would open it up and figure out how it worked and fix it. And that's how kind of computers worked at the time, too. My dad's job was he was a computer programmer. Sometimes he'd take me in on Saturdays when he would go into work. It was a big, kind of like a cubicle farm. They had a really, really fast internet connection compared to our dial-up at home. So that was always very fun and definitely got me excited about different software or games or other things that you could do on it.
Look at our big Christmas. Scott, can you tell us what this is?
It's an Apple computer.
I got my first computer when I was 12 years old.
I ordered it out of a catalog.
It was one of the first Apple computers.
We had a gateway PC, the computers that came in the cow print boxes.
It was in the 5th grade. It was a CRT with the green text on a black background.
My first interaction with the internet would have been just late nights on the computer, slumber parties where we were playing around on the internet. Netscape Navigator, Ask Jeeves. The adults around you didn't really understand, so they just propped this in front of you and said, go ahead. It was the Wild Wild West, if you could imagine.
My friends were saying, hey, if we can go to this computer, we can find out anything. And it was just kind of like this sort of explosion.
I think growing up, the world felt small. It felt hard to pursue the things I wanted to do. I had a Blogger account when I was in 6th grade. I got used to blogging, got used to HTML, got used to CSS, got used to the idea of publishing and that feeling of expressing yourself. Even if it was just a small audience, helped me feel like I actually had a voice. I think it helped me kind of see the world as a bit bigger. Growing up queer and in Florida, I grew up without visible models, and then suddenly you're introduced to this whole world where you can see yourself and you're not feeling so alone.
I was following some blogs, early blogs like scripting.com, Anil Dash, Kotkey. I was like, oh, this seems fun. I could do this. So I tried different software. I started with something called Movable Type, which was based in Perl, but it wasn't open source. It was proprietary software. So I started to explore some of the alternatives, and there was nothing that quite fit what I was looking for. And so I did this blog post called the blogging software dilemma. And I said, I want something with the sensibility of movable type, the ease of use of Blogger, sort of elegance and beauty of text pattern, and the hackability of B2. A gentleman named Mike Little, a few days later, left a comment on this blog and said, hey, if you're serious about doing this, let's work together on it. For as long as we've had things like copyright, we've also had the concept of things like the public domain or creative works that don't belong to one person, but they belong to all humans together. What open source does is it applies that to computer software.
For me, it's the idea of collaboration. The idea that we all work together on something, and there shouldn't be a sort of like one-way street where this group of people creates the thing and this group of people uses the thing.
A good way to describe open source is fundamentally it's a software license. So you know how normally when you use a new software or sign up for a website, they have all these really long legal agreements that no one ever reads. They say, hey, you can use this, but you have to pay us, or you can't sue us, or you can only use it for certain things that we agree with, or if we wake up one day and decide you can't use it anymore, we can take it away from you. You have no recourse. So it's kind of all about protecting the company, and they actually take away freedoms from you. So open source, it is a software license, so it's built on top of copyright, but instead of saying all the things you can't do, it says all the freedoms you have.
I think everyone should care about open source. The way the internet came to be was originally about connecting human knowledge, and that inherently has to be an open endeavor. Knowledge needs to be accessible to everyone.
We really struggled in the early days. I used to joke that WordPress had more developers than users. There was only like a handful of sites. But really the ambition of WordPress in the beginning was just software for me and a few friends. And I don't think any of us in the very early days could even imagine that it would go beyond something that was used by just a couple of sites or maybe just ourselves. It's what's called a CMS, or content management system. So it's software that can run your website. And it started being for just blogging. So you could do like an online journal. And then it evolved to really manage the whole website, so you can have pages. And then it evolved to be kind of like a web operating system. And it's open source, so that means that the code belongs just as much to you as it does to me. So it's pretty neat. It started small, but with a philosophy that started to attract more users, more developers, and really just gradually over time started to pick up steam.
When I joined Automatic, it was 2009, a very different time for the company, much, much smaller, a pretty tight-knit group. There was a real energy around helping people understand this stuff and making it accessible to them.
There was about 50 people when I started. Today, there's, I think, just over 1,500 people. It's not just WordPress anymore. We have a whole suite of products, WooCommerce, Jetpack. Over 40% of the websites in the world are powered by WordPress.
Generally, in product design, you always want to narrow down who you're building for. But in something like WordPress at that scale, you're essentially building for everyone. And that, I think, is a big challenge in itself.
Open source is just such a different way of working that opens us up to massive collaboration and collaboration at scale that you don't in another place, but also comes with its own challenges and inefficiencies. We have to get a community on board. We have to get buy-in. We have to rally the troops around this new design. Whenever they are open source, there is healthy criticism. Maybe not always healthy, but criticism in general, when you open things up and let a lot of people have feedback on it. When you're within one of these walled gardens and doing algorithmic development, one of the problems is often things go uncritiqued. As soon as you open source things like that, you have thousands of people combing over what you're doing, looking for problems. They will evaluate what you're doing to make sure there's no bias, to make sure you're not unfairly penalizing certain groups or communities.
You bring diverse perspectives. There's the level of transparency, even just from sort of a security perspective. I think it's the optimal way to build software at the end of the day.
WordPress is like a language. You learn to speak, you're like, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years old, and then you are never done learning.
To some degree, the superpower and kind of like secret sauce of WordPress is the community. And so much of that really is happening at a local level. Every day there are WordPress meetups happening in hundreds of zip codes across the world, regional WordCamps. There's dozens happening every year as well, and that really fuels the future of this community.
The most important thing, I think, today that WordPress does that is aligned with what I think the internet should be is that the internet has removed the barrier to entry. It used to be that even if you had the best idea in the world, even if you had the best skills, the best motivation to launch a business, to build something, you needed support. You needed capital, you needed often a lot of time. It was not open to everyone. Like, launching a magazine, well, you need to print, you need to distribute, you need a lot of things like that. And so what the internet really has done is allow anyone to start something.
The idea behind Automatic was to take the WordPress software and make it really radically accessible. It takes things that 10 or 20 years ago you'd need to know how to code or hire a developer for hundreds of thousands of dollars or buy very expensive software. We want to take those things that used to be really difficult or expensive and make them very intuitive, easy, and accessible to everyone.
One of the most misunderstood things about open source that people have is that it's free. It is free, but there is a lot of investment that goes into it.
It's not required, but part of the social contract of what makes the most successful open source projects work is that some percentage of the people who use it find a way to give back to that project, to sort of contribute in a way that doesn't just benefit them alone, but benefits the entire community of people that use the software. If you don't invest back into the maintenance of something, if you don't water your garden, if you don't plant new plants, if you don't weed the garden, at some point it will go fallow.
I think it would be a very dystopian internet that we would have if open source wasn't around. I think it would be very easy to lock things down for people to not truly have access to the things they create or the things they care about. It's not something to take for granted. I think it's always at peril if we don't talk about it, if we don't highlight, if we don't celebrate it. It's always possible for things to become more closed.
A walled garden is an app or a website that is fully self-contained. It's all internal and closed. Social networks are a common example. Twitter is an app, it's its own system. Facebook is its own internal system. You have pages, you have people interacting. It is like an internet, but it is not the open, free internet.
We've seen why a controlled platform is a danger. The decentralization of information, where our data is going, how our data is being used.
Each individual person is being picked apart to find out how they could sell more to you, and selling it to God knows who, whether it's huge enterprises or entire governments that want to surveil their citizens. That's the scariest part of these closed systems.
From a user perspective, if you are a content creator on a closed platform, that content is not yours.
Everyone should have a website. Everyone should own their own domain, automatic.com, wordpress.com, johnsmith.com. These other platforms, they serve a really useful purpose for distributing content, for finding community, but you are a tenant on those platforms. If Instagram or Facebook decided that they were going to change their algorithm, or if they suddenly shut down, because people remember, maybe not remember MySpace and Friendster. What happens to that community and audience that you built on those platforms? They go away. They could go away overnight, and there is nothing you can do to bring them back. That's where not being a tenant, but being a landowner on the web is critical. That way, no matter how these companies change, you will have your home on the internet.
I think open source will become a lot more important over the next couple of years. With the rise of AI, you're starting to see a lot more people who are trying to commercialize things that should essentially be open.
OpenAI has been pretty clear about the trajectory it's heading on, that it wants to commercialize its technology.
Despite its namesake, OpenAI is not open at all. It's probably the most closed company in the world.
It's really about closed source versus open source.
Aligning AI with open source is quite hard because all of the major models that are the most successful right now are closed source and are built in ways that arguably are at odds with, fair use. They're all trained on tremendous amounts of copyrighted data from people who didn't opt in, and that's just a fact.
With any closed system, I think the biggest risk is that you're ultimately not in control of what you're creating, whereas with open source models, I think what AI is creating shares the same sort of fundamental freedoms that the software itself has. So I think it creates a fundamentally different collaborative environment where AI is one more player in that collaboration, but the things that are produced are still a material that the human can look, understand, read, and so on.
We are really focusing on using AI to make WordPress even more accessible to non-technical people. I think that's one of the biggest gaps that we still face.
AI opens up the door for more people to be able to modify the software to their needs. So I think it's a critical component and a critical advantage of open source in this new age.
I'm particularly interested in how we can expand access to open source to more people who are queer or from a different country or speak a different language or whatever. I think we need as many different people as possible involved.
The future of the web is, it's not certain. And I think that companies like Automatic will fight for it, and the hopeful part of me says we'll be successful.
Growing up, we didn't have a lot, but there was always a lot of love, support, and curiosity. I knew that my family would always be there for me. And I think that enabled me to sort of take more risk as an entrepreneur. But I didn't actually realize how much my dad followed what I did or how proud he was until after he passed. One of the things I found out was that at the office, there was a little bulletin board, and when there's a press article in the newspaper or something, he would actually print it out and put it on the bulletin board. And yeah, when I learned that, I was like, oh, that just really affected me. I was like, wow, I didn't realize that he followed it so much. It takes people really believing and fighting to, create a more free society, a more just society. Things don't happen by default. It does require tapping into the inner altruism and the collaborative nature that makes, humanity really beautiful. When we work for something that's not just for ourselves, but really aims to benefit others. Planting a tree that you will never live to see the shade on, but you're doing it for future generations, you're doing it for others. That sort of spirit is very much at the core of what motivates people to contribute to open source, and hopefully motivates people to use open source as well.
I hope open source will continue to stand for humility, kindness,
collaboration,
trust,
community,
security, that people can choose.
I think open source is part of a line of human developments that sort of stitch history together. It's a mechanism with which we can give back to the long story of human creativity.
Code for the people, that's what we do.